Swamp Thing Volume 2, Issue 23. This is the second issue of the reissue arc, featuring Jason Woodrue. This is called Another Green World. And in DC Comics, Swamp Thing Comics introduced the concept of the green, which is not just the plants and the trees, but this other world, almost like another plane of reality, where the whole entire plant world lives and communicates, a network. And so here, the Swamp Thing is saying, this is the red world. The red world is where you lose your life, you lose your friends, your family. And Swamp Thing is just here rooted. And he's just kind of like said, so I gave up the red world, and I'm someplace nice and green. And just wanted to mention, this is something that I mentioned in the first video that I did, that when you look at the omnibus or the trades, there's a lot of these 2-panel spreads in Swamp Thing, and this run of Swamp Thing, that when you have the comic issues, and I'll point them out when I start going through the books, you don't lose, but when you have the omnibus or you have the trades, you have what they call gutter loss. It depends how picky you are. But to me, that's the only drawback about having the omnibus or the trades, is that you have that. You can't see the art as it was made, because it was made for a comic. It wasn't made for thinking, hey, we're going to put a trade together later. But this is where they introduced the concept of the green. And Swamp Thing is floating. He's at peace. He's calm. And the way they draw him here just looks calm and content. And then in the green, he finds something unusual. So they see him floating, and he finds something unusual. Then you cut, which is another Alan Moore trick. These are 3 guys out in the woods, Louisiana. One guy swears he sees something. He goes, I guess I was wrong. So when they come out, you see this reflection in the glass, and then they turn, they see Woodrue. And Woodrue kills all 3 of these young men using the plants. And you can just see where it grabs them, and it's just like, the death is kind of like off camera, where they only show the dangly legs, but you can see how he was killed. And then you have this close-up where he's like, there. So you come back, and against that Alan Moore thing where he's got multiple things going on, and he cuts from one point to another, but it's never confusing, and it all flows. It's just very well crafted. So the Swamp Thing is here trying to figure out, what is this disturbance in the green? He doesn't even call it the green yet. So he's like trying to learn more about it. Then you cut back to Abigail, who was at night looking for Alec Holland. And she sees the hanging bodies that Woodrue just sent. And Woodrue is sending the plants to attack her, and she's running. And her instinct is to yell for Alec. And she's just running through the swamp. So you have the Swamp Thing calm in the green. Woodrue is becoming homicidal. The Swamp Thing is trying to determine what the disturbance is. And then Abigail's under threat. And you have these things that'll just go back, but it builds so well. So the Swamp Thing is here. He's here, and he's trying to figure out, he realizes, oh, it's Woodrue, and he determines it's Woodrue. So Woodrue walks into this small town, starts destroying buildings by controlling the plants, by having trees and other vegetation crush them. A cop tries to like stop him. He kills the cop, and then everybody comes out, and he tells them, everybody, go back to your house. He goes, but I need a guy with a video recorder and a cassette player. So this guy comes out, and then you see what his plan is that everybody goes home. He tells everybody, go home. If you go home, you'll be safe. Everybody goes home. He increases the vegetation to basically all the vines and roots cover all the openings of the house, making them effectively airtight. Then he has the plants pump out 10 times as much oxygen as normal. So he heightens up the oxygen amount. Starts affecting people. Somebody lights a cigarette, and because there's too much oxygen, it sets off an explosion. And all these explosions are like series of explosions, one after the other. And it's like fire, even French is like firecrackers. And he makes this kid who came with this equipment film everything and record everything. And he also records a message. And then once he does that, he sends them to another town. And then here, the Swamp Thing is realizing that what Woodrew's doing, he's starting to realize what Woodrew is doing. And Abigail is running and she's like, Alec, please, please, it's got my legs, please. I can't hold on. She's desperate. And then just when it looks like the plants are going to engulf her, you see the Swamp Thing's hand raise up and he unroots himself. And like here, as I said, he looks like a swamp creature. Roots, vines, vegetation. And he saves her. And she says, Alec? And he goes, no, not Alec. He realizes, he's come to grips that he's not Alec Holland. She refers to him as Alec, but she doesn't know everything that's happened. So the man with the video camera and the cassette walks to the next town a few hours later, goes to the cops. He's sort of like, he's half mad. He's asking for his sister. So it takes a while to rustle up the equipment. And again, this is back in the 80s where you just didn't have video equipment and all this equipment handy. This was like, not everybody has equipment. It was big, it was bulky, it was expensive. But what he does as a little effective thing is that he comes in, he shows, they look at the video, and he says, this guy sees it, he says, he calls Morgan City, and Morgan City called Washington. And I like how they do this. So the yellow box and the black and white for emphasis in white font, it writes, and Washington called the Justice League. So all of a sudden, that shows you that they're considering this a top level threat where they have to call the Justice League. But they don't tell you what's on the video, not yet. So you know what's kind of going on, but you don't know everything. The sheriff that's here, he goes home, he tells his wife everything that happened. He said, get every plant out of the house. He starts putting chemicals to burn his yard, and there's this tree, and he talks about how this tree has been a good tree. They planted it when they first moved in here, and he ends up chopping it down. And it's kind of interesting because we have a weird relationship with vegetation where we chop down forests, but at the same time we keep plants inside the house, and we keep plants in our yards as a memory. And then you cut back where this resident says enough, and he's like, no, it's not enough. And he's basically, Woodrew has become a homicidal eco-terrorist, where he's like, was it enough when you sit there and you chainsaw the Amazon? Is it enough when you destroy the plants? And he's just going more and more berserk. And he's like saying, the plants have told me that they want all the animals gone. And he's getting even more, and the way they draw, and so I'll get back to the way they draw it. Then he gets more and more maniacal. And then he's at this like frenzy, and then you see Woodrew. And then you just see the Swamp Thing like approaching, and he says, enough. So now the next issue is the showdown. But what I really liked is just this beautiful art where you're like in this plant kind of universe or dimension. Then nighttime with the darks and the blues, and then this plant dimension, and then the same type of coloring for Abigail's at night. And then I love how when they show the Floronic Man, how they show his eyes, that focus on his eyes, he looks crazed, just to kind of imply that he's malevolent. And then how they more walks you through what all the plants are doing and how they all blew up. And then Woodrew has this look of like, good, like this is part of the plan, and he's just gonna move on. He feels like he's found his calling in life. And then these are your standard panels, but then I love these kind of panels that kind of like go this way, and it's just her and her and her. And like I said, I love these close-up panels, especially that underneath lighting, like you would have underneath shot, like you would have like in a horror film, and then just this one hand to kind of like clue you in what's happening. Instead of giving you the whole reveal here, you have a partial reveal here, and then you have the full reveal here. And the first thing she says, Alec? He goes, no, not Alec. But I love this one single panel, just to kind of show him this uprooting himself and like getting back into the world. this little calming thing here, like, you know that Swamp Thing is going to go confront the Pharaonic Man. But there's 2 pages where he makes it very personal. Like, one, he shows, you know, that the Justice League are going to get involved. But then he goes back home and he's like, you know, there's a little heart thing that they, you know, they put in when they first bought the tree, and you can tell that she's kind of sad, but he's terrified that they're going to use these plants to kill him. And then more and more as they show the frenzy, you see all these reds and yellows. They're from the fire, but they're really effective in showing the frenzy, and then these close-ups and these unusual underneath angles, the shock looks on people's faces, and then how he's being malevolent, and then they have him colored in red with these flashing eyes, and just looks really, really like a frenzy visually until the Swamp Thing comes. And then you just have this panel where you have them up front right here and then back here, and you can tell it's like a standoff. Again, the art, this was not common and definitely not big 2 comics. This is one of those cases where you get a character that has been a cult character, doesn't have a lot of sales. You revive them, and because it's under the radar, you can get away with a lot of stuff and just do a lot of unique stuff because they're like, yeah, let's see if we can get the sales up. And so the next issue is the final issue in this arc where Swamp Thing and Woodrue confront each other.